"Excuse me, sir, but my mother has a ring just like that one," the 26-year-old black waiter said, his voice a soft, almost imperceptible murmur, yet it sliced through the hushed elegance of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant. His gaze, discreetly, subtly, directed at the hand of the man he was serving. The silence that followed was instantaneous, thick, and suffocating. Richard Blackstone, 62, a real estate mogul whose $3 billion fortune bought him immunity from most of the world's discomforts, felt the blood drain from his veins. His eyes, wide with a sudden, dawning horror, fixed on the young man, Devon, whose name tag seemed to mock him with its quiet normalcy. Just moments before, Devon had calmly placed a $1,200 glass of wine before him, a gesture of impeccable service that now felt like a prelude to an execution. The ring. It glittered on Blackstone's hand, a Burmese ruby surrounded by diamonds, a bespoke creation from 1942. Only two existed in the entire world, each a perfect, unique twin. "That's impossible," Blackstone muttered, the words caught in his throat, betraying a raw nervousness he couldn't hide, a tremor in his carefully constructed composure. Devon, however, maintained his professional smile, a facade of polite deference. But his eyes, deep and knowing, held something else entirely. A disturbing calm, a quiet resolve that only exists in those who have discovered truths too powerful, too dangerous, to be ignored. It was the calm of a predator, not a servant. Devon Williams had only been working at the restaurant for 3 months, a mere blink in Blackstone's opulent life. Yet, in that short time, he had meticulously absorbed every detail of the regular customers' lives, especially Richard Blackstone, the man who consistently occupied table 17 every Wednesday. Always alone, always arrogant, always treating the staff as if they were mere extensions of the expensive silverware, utterly invisible. "Maybe it's a coincidence," Devon said, his voice carrying an almost imperceptible irony, a subtle twist that pricked at Blackstone's carefully guarded sanity. "Although my mother always said she inherited this ring from her old boss, a very generous man." Blackstone's hand clenched around his napkin, the expensive linen tearing under the unexpected force. His fingers trembled slightly, a subtle betraying tremor as he struggled to process the unfolding nightmare. The second ring. The one he had given to the young maid in 1995. It should have vanished forever, along with her, a forgotten secret buried deep beneath layers of wealth and power. Devon watched every micro-expression flit across the billionaire's face. Every bead of sweat that began to form on his artificially tanned forehead. Every desperate, frantic attempt to maintain his composure in the face of a revelation that threatened to shatter decades of carefully curated reputation. "Does your mother still have the ring?" Blackstone asked, trying to sound casual, trying to project an air of disinterest, but failing miserably. His voice was higher than normal, thin with strain. "She did," Devon corrected, and for the first time, his professional smile faltered, just for a split second, a fleeting glimpse of the raw emotion beneath. "She died 2 years ago. Cancer. She couldn't afford proper treatment." The weight of those words echoed across the table like a sentence, a pronouncement not just of death, but of neglect, of a deliberate turning away. Blackstone knew. He knew exactly who Devon's mother was. He knew what he had done to her. He knew why she had never reported him. He knew why she had vanished from the city, carrying only that ring as the sole, damning evidence of a decade-long injustice. Devon straightened up, adjusting the tray he held with the elegance of someone who knew exactly what he was doing, orchestrating a moment of profound significance. "Can I get you anything else? Maybe a photo of my mother. She kept several from when she worked for important people." Blackstone's eyes widened, truly understanding now. This was no mere coincidence. It was a silent declaration of war, delivered with the surgical precision of someone who had planned every word, every gesture, every calculated moment. "That won't be necessary," Blackstone replied, his voice barely a whisper. Devon nodded, that disturbing calm radiating from him, making the air in the opulent room feel heavy, suffocating. "Of course, sir. I'll be here if you change your mind. After all, some stories need to be told, don't they?" As he walked away from the table, Devon felt Blackstone's desperate gaze burning into his back. The plan, 2 years in the making, was finally in motion. And best of all, Blackstone still had no idea how deep the hole he had dug for himself truly was. Blackstone finished his meal in silence, the exquisite food turning to ash in his mouth. But even as he mechanically went through the motions, he could feel Devon's eyes, a persistent, burning gaze, following his every move around the opulent restaurant. It was exactly the reaction Devon had hoped for, that toxic mixture of paranoia and arrogance that had driven Blackstone for decades and, in doing so, had destroyed so many lives. 2 hours later, as the workday ended and the last patrons drifted out, Devon found Blackstone waiting outside, leaning against a gleaming silver Bentley, a car that cost more than most people earned in 5 years. "We need to talk," Blackstone said, attempting to project his usual authoritative tone, but Devon noticed the tremor in his voice, the nervousness lurking just beneath the polished facade. "Sure, Mr. Blackstone. My shift just ended." Devon walked up to the man who had haunted his nightmares since childhood, maintaining that disturbing calm that made Blackstone feel as if he were losing control of a situation he should completely dominate. "Your mother. What was her name again?" Blackstone asked, feigning casualness, though his voice was strained. "Grace Williams," Devon replied simply, his words like a precisely aimed dart. "She worked cleaning your mansion in Greenwich, 1995. The name hit Blackstone like a physical punch to the stomach. Grace Williams. The 19-year-old he had hired when she was desperate for work, pregnant, and abandoned by her boyfriend. The same Grace who had witnessed his special meetings with Russian investors in the basement of the mansion, where false documents were signed and dirty money changed hands. "I don't remember any Grace," Blackstone lied, but his voice betrayed the vivid, horrifying memory he was desperately trying to suppress. Devon smiled then, not the professional, polite smile he wore in the restaurant, but something much more dangerous, a slow, knowing curve of the lips that promised reckoning. "It's funny how memory works, isn't it? My mother remembered every detail, especially the night you offered her that ring." The night in question had been in December 1995. Grace was cleaning the office, her movements quiet and practiced, when she heard Blackstone yelling on the phone about problems with the authorities, about crucial evidence that needed to disappear. She had hidden behind a heavy curtain, her heart hammering, listening to the chilling details. Bribes paid to zoning officials, forged documents that allowed illegal construction in protected areas. When Blackstone discovered her there, standing with a cleaning rag still clutched in her trembling hands, his eyes had filled with that icy, malevolent fury she would recognize for the rest of her life. "How much did you hear?" he had demanded, advancing toward her, a predator closing in. "Nothing, sir. I was just cleaning." But they both knew it was a lie. "Your mother was a discreet woman," Blackstone said now, choosing his words with uncharacteristic care, a desperate attempt to regain some semblance of control. "She always respected her employer's privacy." "Discreet?" Devon laughed softly, a sound devoid of humor. "That's an interesting way to describe someone who was threatened with death if she spoke about what she saw." The memory came back with full, visceral force to Blackstone. He had given Grace the ring that night, not as a gift, but as a chilling, permanent reminder of the silent, terrified agreement between them. "This ring is worth more than you'll earn in 10 years, he had snarled, pushing it into her trembling hand. "But if you open your mouth about what you've heard here, I guarantee you and your baby will disappear without a trace." Grace had taken the ring, her hands shaking, knowing she was accepting not just a piece of jewelry, but a sentence of perpetual silence. "She never said a word," Devon continued, his voice steady, laced with sorrow and steel. "She moved to Detroit, raised me on her own, working 3 different jobs. She always said the truth would come out someday." Blackstone, ever the opportunist, tried one last desperate gambit to regain control. "Look, kid. I don't know what kind of fantasy your mother created, but I can offer you something. A better job, maybe. $50,000 for you to forget these crazy stories." The bribe. It was exactly what Devon had hoped for. Blackstone still believed that everyone had a price, that all problems could be solved with money. 50,000. Devon pretended to consider the proposal, letting a calculated pause hang in the air. "You know, it's funny. My mother died owing $230,000 in medical bills. Insurance didn't cover the experimental treatment that could have saved her life. The sarcasm in Devon's voice was as sharp as a knife, cutting through Blackstone's self-assured facade. 50,000. It's almost insulting, don't you think? Blackstone felt cold sweat trickle down his back. This waiter was not a desperate victim who could be easily bought off. There was something terrifyingly calculated in the way he spoke, as if every word was part of a larger, unseen plan. 100,000 then, Blackstone offered, his voice sounding more desperate, more strained. Final. Devon shook his head slowly, deliberately. You still don't understand, do you? This was never about money. Then what do you want? Blackstone practically hissed. Justice, Devon replied simply, the word hanging in the air like a pronouncement. My mother spent 29 years living in fear. Moving from city to city whenever she thought you'd found us. Working herself to death because she could never use references from her job at your mansion. Dying in silence because she was convinced that if she spoke, I would pay the price. The truth, though, was that Grace had tried to tell her story several times over the years. First to a local reporter in Detroit who mysteriously pulled the story at the last minute. Then to a civil rights lawyer whose office was broken into the following week, all the files stolen. With each failed attempt, Grace understood better the terrifying extent of Blackstone's power. She died believing you were untouchable, Devon said, his voice hard. But things have changed a lot in the last few years, haven't they? Blackstone tried one last shot at intimidation, his voice dropping to a low growl. Watch your words, kid. I have lawyers who can destroy your life with a single phone call. I'm sure you do, Devon replied calmly, that unnerving smile returning. But I have something your lawyers will never be able to buy or intimidate. And what would that be? Blackstone demanded, a genuine chill of fear now creeping down his spine. Patience, Devon said, his voice soft, yet chillingly resolute, and a plan that took 2 years to execute. As he walked back to his car, leaving Blackstone standing alone on the sidewalk, a statue of petrified dread, Devon felt the immense weight of the promise he had made at his mother's grave. Grace Williams had died in silence, but Richard Blackstone would learn that her son had inherited not only her ring, but also her burning memory for injustice. Each new threat, each pathetic attempt at bribery, only fueled something inside Devon that his oppressor couldn't see. A determination forged by years of silent suffering and tempered by the absolute conviction that the time had come for the truth to come to light. What Blackstone didn't know was that every word of that conversation had been recorded by the discreet device in Devon's pocket, and that this was only the first move in a game the billionaire didn't even realize he had already lost. Over the next 2 weeks, Blackstone tried everything to make Devon yield. First came the psychological pressure. Anonymous phone calls in the dead of night, their silence more menacing than any threat. Strange cars parked outside the small apartment Devon shared with 2 college friends, their occupants unseen, yet their presence a constant, unsettling surveillance. Then came the professional pressure, a casual, insidious conversation between Blackstone and the restaurant owner about problem employees who could damage the establishment's meticulously crafted reputation. Blackstone still believed in the corrosive power of fear and reputation, his 2 most reliable weapons for decades. But Devon had learned from Grace Williams that patience was a more powerful weapon than any direct confrontation. Each new attempt at intimidation only confirmed what he already knew. Blackstone was desperate, flailing in unfamiliar territory. You have no idea what you're getting yourself into, a voice said behind Devon as he waited for the bus home on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Devon turned to find a man in his 40s, dressed in an expensive but not ostentatious suit, his eyes revealing a sharp intelligence that belied his understated appearance. You must be Richard Blackstone. You finally decided to show up in person. I'm Michael Harrison, the man corrected, Blackstone's lawyer. And I can assure you that you don't want this going to court. Devon smiled, that unsettling calm returning, the smile that was fast becoming his trademark. Court? Who said anything about courts? I just mentioned that my mother had an interesting ring. Harrison studied Devon with renewed attention. There was something about the young man's composure that didn't fit the profile of the desperate victim he had expected to find. My client is willing to make a final offer, Harrison stated, a hint of frustration in his voice. $250,000. You sign a confidentiality agreement, and everyone goes on with their lives. Interesting, Devon replied, pretending to consider the offer, drawing out the moment. But I have a counter-proposal. Harrison's eyebrow quirked, a flicker of professional curiosity. I'm listening. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Because this was never about money, Mr. Harrison. Devon's gaze intensified, locking with the lawyer's. It's about something your client lost a long time ago and will never be able to buy back. And what would that be? Harrison asked, a tremor of unease now affecting his own composure. Peaceful sleep. The bus arrived, its mechanical hiss a jarring intrusion. Devon boarded, leaving Harrison standing alone in the rain, a picture of bewildered frustration. This was not the behavior of someone who could be easily intimidated or bought. What neither Harrison nor Blackstone knew was that Devon was not acting alone. 3 months before getting the job at the restaurant, he had sought out the only person who could help him navigate the complex, treacherous legal world surrounding men like Blackstone. Jessica Chun was an assistant district attorney in the Southern District of New York, specializing in financial crimes and corruption. More importantly, she had met Grace Williams. Your mother came to my office in 2018, Jessica explained during her first meeting with Devon. She had documents, dates, names, everything we needed to open an investigation into Blackstone. And why didn't you do anything? Devon asked, the familiar mix of anger and determination simmering within him. Because 48 hours later, Jessica replied, her voice grim, our key witness, a former employee willing to corroborate your mother's story, died in a car accident. And 2 other contacts disappeared from the city without a trace. Devon felt the chilling echo of his mother's fear. But things are different now. They've changed a lot, Jessica agreed. The Panama Papers scandal, new financial transparency laws, public pressure on corporate corruption. In 2018, Blackstone was untouchable. Today, he's a target. It was Jessica who had meticulously instructed Devon on how to document every interaction with Blackstone. Every meeting, every attempt at bribery, every implied threat was being carefully recorded and catalogued, building a meticulously damning case. He's behaving exactly as we expected, Jessica said as she analyzed the recordings of the restaurant conversation. Arrogant, desperate, and committing new crimes with every attempt to cover up the old ones. How much time do we need? Devon asked, his mind already several steps ahead, envisioning the endgame. 2 more weeks, Jessica replied. There's a federal audit of his companies starting next month. If we can present solid evidence of extortion and intimidation before then, it'll be the final push they need to open a full criminal investigation. Devon nodded, but his mind was already moving beyond the official channels. Official justice was important, vital even, but he had much more personal plans for Richard Blackstone. 2 days later, Devon received an unexpected call at work. Devon Williams. This is Theodore Blackstone. The last name made Devon stop immediately. Richard's brother. Devon asked. Son, Theodore corrected. And I'd very much like to talk to you. Theodore Blackstone was everything his father was not. Ethical, compassionate, and genuinely committed to social justice. At 35, he had long distanced himself from the family business when he discovered the true, rotten source of the Blackstone fortune. My father doesn't know I'm calling, Theodore explained during their meeting at a discreet Brooklyn cafe. But I've known about Grace Williams for years. How? Devon asked, a tremor of hope blossoming in his chest. Because I hired private investigators when I first began to suspect that our fortune was built on something rotten. They found evidence of at least 6 families who were silenced or intimidated over the years. Theodore slid a folder across the table. These are copies of documents I got from my father's office. Fraudulent contracts, records of payments to influence public officials, correspondence about how to deal with problematic witnesses. Devon opened the folder and felt his heart race. There it was. Decades of systematic corruption, meticulously documented in chilling detail. Why are you giving this to me? Devon asked, his voice barely a whisper. Because justice delayed isn't justice denied, Theodore replied, his gaze firm. And because I want my son to grow up knowing that when it came time to choose between family and doing the right thing, I chose to do the right thing. That night, Devon called Jessica with a single sentence. We just won the game. But even as he organized the evidence that would officially destroy Richard Blackstone, Devon knew that the true revenge was yet to come. Because some crimes cannot be paid for with prison or bankruptcy. Some crimes must be paid for with a complete destruction of everything the criminal believes to be his identity. And Devon had spent the last 2 years planning exactly that. While Blackstone slept in his mansion, convinced he was dealing with yet another desperate young man who could be bought or intimidated, Devon was finalizing preparations for something that would make the billionaire question every decision he had made in the last 30 years. Official justice would be just the appetizer. The main course would be much more personal. The following Wednesday was a night like any other at Manhattan's exclusive elite charity gala. 300 guests, each ticket costing a prohibitive $5,000, mingled under the glittering chandeliers, their conversations broadcast live on the city's major social media networks. Richard Blackstone had bought an entire table, as he did every year, a ritual of ostentatious generosity designed to inflate his ego before the cameras. It was the kind of event that fed his carefully cultivated image: photographs with prominent politicians, handshakes with other billionaires, speeches about social responsibility from the man who had spent 3 decades callously destroying lives to build his fortune. Devon arrived at the hotel as an outsourced employee of the catering company, blending seamlessly into the background. He wore a discreet uniform, a tray held steady in his hand, completely invisible to the guests who didn't even bother to glance at the faces of the people serving them. This was his stage, and invisibility, as his mother had taught him, was a powerful disguise. Champagne, Mr. Blackstone. Devon offered, approaching the head table where the billionaire was posing for photos with the mayor. Blackstone recognized him immediately, and his face, moments ago radiating an aura of confident power, turned a sickly shade of pale. "What the hell are you doing here?" he hissed, his voice barely a whisper, laced with a raw, undiluted panic. "Working," Devon replied calmly, his voice a steady counterpoint to Blackstone's fraying composure. "Just like my mother did when you threatened to kill her." The polite chatter around the table died down instantly. The mayor and the other guests looked confused, their socialite smiles faltering at the sudden, palpable tension between the two men. "Security!" Blackstone bellowed, his voice cracking, a desperate, almost pathetic plea. But Devon raised a hand, a peaceful, deliberate gesture. "There's no need for that, Mr. Blackstone. I just came to give you something that belongs to you." With a practiced motion, Devon placed a thick, sealed envelope on the pristine white tablecloth, directly in front of the cameras that were still broadcasting live. The envelope contained copies of all the damning documents Theodore had provided, meticulously arranged, alongside the crystal-clear recordings of every attempt at bribery and intimidation over the past few weeks. "You always said that every man has his price," Devon said, his voice clear, calm, and loud enough for the microphones to pick up every word. "But you forgot to ask what the price of justice is." Blackstone tore open the envelope with trembling, fumbling hands. As he read, his expression morphed from confusion to absolute, soul-shattering horror. There it was, 30 years of his crimes, meticulously documented in minute detail. Every bribe, every threat, every family he had destroyed. Where did you get this?" Blackstone whispered, his voice a ragged gasp. "Your own son," Devon replied simply, the truth a final, devastating blow. "Theodore has a conscience you never developed." The entire hall was silent now, a collective gasp echoing through the vast room. The cameras, once focused on the glittering facade of power, now swung wildly, capturing every agonizing detail. Blackstone, appearing to suffer a nervous breakdown, and Devon, who maintained the disturbing, unflinching calm he had perfected over the years. Jessica Chun entered the hall at that exact moment, her presence commanding, accompanied by 4 federal agents. It was no coincidence. Devon had timed every detail, every agonizing second, to ensure maximum public impact. "Richard Blackstone," Jessica announced, her voice strong and clear, resonating through the shocked silence, is under arrest for extortion, bribery of public officials, tax fraud, and witness intimidation. The silence was broken by the sharp, metallic snap of handcuffs being fastened, followed by a blinding flurry of camera flashes. Blackstone looked around desperately, his eyes wide, wild, searching for an exit, an ally, anything that could save him from this public, humiliating annihilation. "This is a mistake," he shouted as he was led away, his voice hoarse with fury and disbelief. "I have lawyers. I have connections." Devon walked over to where Blackstone was being handcuffed, his gaze steady, unwavering. "Do you know the difference between us, Mr. Blackstone? You always believed that power is taking what you want from people weaker than you." He paused, letting the weight of his next words settle. "I've learned that true power is using the system against those who think they're above it." Blackstone tried one last desperate gambit, a pathetic attempt to wound. "You think this will bring your mother back? You think this changes anything?" Devon smiled then, not with anger, but with the quiet, profound satisfaction of someone who had finally seen justice done, a deep sense of closure settling over him. "No, it won't bring my mother back," he conceded, his voice soft. "But it will ensure that other mothers don't go through what mine did. And sometimes," he added, his gaze meeting Blackstone's, a flicker of triumph in his eyes, "that's enough." As Blackstone was led away by the agents, his empire crumbling around him in real time, Devon turned to the cameras still broadcasting live, the world now watching. "My name is Devon Williams. My mother's name was Grace Williams. For 29 years, she lived in fear of a man who believed he was above the law. Today, we proved that no one is." The event host, desperately trying to regain control of the chaotic situation, whispered something about cutting the feed, but it was too late. The story was already spreading like wildfire across social media, videos being shared thousands of times per minute. Theodore Blackstone approached Devon amid the chaos, his face etched with a mix of relief and profound gratitude. "Thank you," he said simply, extending a hand, "for doing what I never had the courage to do." "Thank you for giving me the tools to do this right," Devon replied, grasping Theodore's hand firmly. As the gala guests whispered and speculated, trying to distance themselves from Blackstone before his tarnished reputation could touch theirs, Devon discreetly removed the small recorder from his pocket and handed it to Jessica. "Today's conversation," he explained. "He tried to bribe me again just before you arrived." Jessica shook her head, impressed, a rare smile gracing her lips. "You documented everything." "My mother taught me that the truth always finds a way to come out," Devon replied. "I just had to give it a little help." In the minutes that followed Blackstone's dramatic arrest, as the news exploded and spread across the city, 3 other victims of Blackstone's decades of intimidation emerged from the shadows, emboldened by Devon's audacious courage. Families that had been silenced for decades finally found their voice, their testimonies adding to the growing mountain of evidence. Blackstone's empire, built on corruption and fear, began to crumble in real time. Stocks plummeted, furious business partners cancelled contracts, and federal investigations opened in multiple states. Devon left the hotel that night knowing that his mother could finally rest in peace. The promise whispered at her grave 2 years earlier had been fulfilled. But as he walked through the vibrant, chaotic streets of Manhattan, he passed a newsstand where the first copies of the special edition papers were already on sale. The headline screamed, "Billionaire arrested in live scandal, son exposes own father." Devon stopped and bought a copy, not out of vanity, but because he wanted to make sure that Grace Williams' story was finally being told the way it deserved to be. On the front page, his photo was next to his mother's. 2 generations united in the relentless pursuit of justice. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about proving that systems built to protect the powerful could be used to protect the vulnerable, as long as someone had enough patience and intelligence to work within them. It was about turning pain into purpose and silence into a roaring revolution. 6 months after Blackstone's arrest, Devon Williams was sitting in an office overlooking Central Park, not as a visitor, but as the owner. The Grace Williams Foundation, created with some of the money recovered from Blackstone's fraudulent schemes, had already helped 43 families who had suffered corporate intimidation, providing them with legal aid and support. Richard Blackstone, meanwhile, awaited trial in a federal prison, abandoned by his former elite friends who now fled him like rats from a sinking ship. His lawyers had managed to reduce his bail to a mere $50 million, an impossible sum for someone whose assets had been completely frozen by the courts. Ironic, isn't it? Jessica Chun commented during a meeting at the foundation. He spent his whole life buying people, and when he needed real friends, he discovered that money can't buy genuine loyalty. Theodore Blackstone had taken control of the family businesses, implementing strict ethical policies and establishing a reparations program for his father's victims, striving to rebuild the company with integrity. Some fortunes need to be rebuilt from scratch, he explained at a press conference that Devon watched on television in his office, feeling a quiet satisfaction. The case had become a legal landmark. Prosecutors in 5 different states opened similar investigations, using the model created by Jessica and Devon to combat corporate intimidation. The Williams Doctrine, as the press dubbed it, set new precedents for protecting witnesses who reported white-collar crimes, giving teeth to laws that had long been ignored. Devon never worked as a waiter again, but he kept a photo of the restaurant staff on his desk, a constant reminder of where he came from. Some of his former colleagues now worked at the foundation. Others had gotten better jobs with letters of recommendation that Devon wrote personally, advocating for them with the same fierce dedication he had shown his mother. The most touching story came 3 months after Blackstone's arrest. A 60-year-old woman named Patricia Johnson approached the foundation with a case almost identical to Grace Williams' intimidation, forced silence, decades of fear. But this time, there was someone willing to listen and take action. "My mother died believing she was alone in this fight," Devon said during the first hearing in the Johnson case. "Today, no family has to face this battle alone." Blackstone, in a final desperate gambit, offered to turn in other corrupt businessmen in exchange for a reduced sentence, but he found that even his dirty secrets had lost their value. The elite he had protected for decades now treated him like a radioactive outcast. On sentencing day, Devon was in court, watching as the judge delivered the verdict: 25 years in prison. Blackstone would walk out of jail an 87-year-old man, if he walked out at all. When the 2 men's eyes met for the last time, Devon felt no anger or satisfaction, just the quiet peace of someone who had turned trauma into purpose. "He wanted to know if I felt vindicated," Devon told Theodore after the hearing. "I said revenge was too small a word to describe how I felt. It was justice. It was closure. It was proof that systems can work when the right people decide to make them work." The foundation grew exponentially. Volunteer lawyers, retired investigators, idealistic journalists. Everyone wanted to be part of something that was truly changing lives. Devon had discovered that his true calling was not waiting tables, but serving justice. A year after Blackstone's arrest, Devon was invited to speak at the graduation ceremony of the law school where his mother had dreamed of studying before pregnancy interrupted her plans. "Grace Williams never had the chance to fight for justice in the courts," Devon told the graduates. "But she taught me that justice is not the privilege of those with degrees. It is the responsibility of those with courage." His mother's ring now hung in the foundation's main hall, accompanied by a simple plaque: "Grace Williams, 1976 to 2023. Taught us that enforced silence is not the end of the story. It's just the beginning of a fight for those who have enough love to carry on." Blackstone had tried to use power and money to write the story the way he wanted. But he discovered that there are forces more powerful than wealth, memory, justice, and the relentless determination of a son who refused to let his mother's legacy die in silence. Devon Williams proved that the best revenge isn't destroying those who hurt you. It's building something so powerful and positive that the evil they tried to do becomes irrelevant in the face of the good you create. "My mom always said that the truth has legs," Devon reflected, looking out the window of his office. "Sometimes it just needs someone willing to teach it how to run."